Monday, everyone. John Lorden here with another episode of Brain Scratch, Case Cracked. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Before we jump into today's case, I want to let you guys know that Danielle Hallen and myself worked on a really good episode of Crime After Crime. It's about murdering mother-in-laws, and if you haven't heard the story of Ma Duncan, I really think you want to check that out. So I'm going to have a link in the description box below to Crime After Crime, Episode 9, Murdering Mother-in-Laws. You can also search for it wherever you find your favorite podcasts. All right, let's get to today's case. I like to call this one Backyard Justice. I want to give a very big thank you to Denise Boyle for making the suggestion, and a big thank you to Christy Arnhart for working so hard on the script today. Let's get into it. It's January 6th, 1993 in Jacksonville, Florida. Michael and Bonnie Haim had just celebrated their 5th Christmas together with their 3-year-old son, Aaron. Michael worked as a manager at a construction supply company owned by his aunt, Evan, and her husband. His wife, Bonnie, did the accounting for the construction supply business. With a single-story, 3-bedroom ranch house on a quiet residential street in the northern part of town, life had seemed good for the young couple, but by the holiday season of 1992, their relationship was at a breaking point. They fought frequently, and their blow-ups would often turn violent. Evan claimed that Michael was often abusive to Bonnie, at least once at the office. He even became physical. Quote, "One day they got into an argument in the parking lot, and she came in crying, and he had slammed her hand in the door, and her nails were broke, and she was very upset at that point." The evening of the 6th, Bonnie planned to come home from work at around 7:30 p.m. and go to Evan's house to help plan a friend's baby shower. But by 8:30 p.m., she had called to cancel their plans. She was crying and she was upset. I asked why. She said that she and Mike had gotten into a discussion, and I asked if she wanted me to call her back later, and she said no, that she would just talk to me in the morning, said Evan. The next morning, neither of the two would show up for work. Michael said that the night before, Bonnie drove off alone after they had an argument around 11 p.m. When she had not returned the next morning, Michael called in sick to work and asked his mother, Carolyn Haim, to watch Aaron while he looked for Bonnie. After being gone for 45 minutes, he returned to the house alone, where he waited until the next morning, the 8th, to call police. As investigators prepared to start their search for Bonnie, they received a call from the Red Roof Inn by the Jacksonville airport, just 5 miles from the Haim home. A maintenance worker discovered Bonnie's purse buried in one of the motel's dumpsters. Detective Robert Hinson of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department would be first on the scene. According to him, robbery was not a motive due to the amount of money and credit cards left in the purse. Detective Hinson had also taken Michael's statement and was less than convinced by his account of events. The detective followed his instincts and looked around Jacksonville Airport, which was near the motel. Sure enough, it was there that Detective Hinson found Bonnie's car, abandoned in the long-term parking lot of the airport. Investigators found that the driver's seat had been pushed back to accommodate a driver much taller than Bonnie. On the driver's side floorboard of the car was a fresh shoe print with the pattern of a unique athletic shoe, a type of shoe that investigators would learn Michael also owned. When questioned, surprisingly, Bonnie's family came to Michael's defense. Bonnie's father, Robert Pesquido, claimed that he felt she had left her husband and abandoned her son, even though friends and even Michael's family claimed otherwise. There are thousands of women who leave their husbands and families every year, he would say, and it's always a complete surprise to their families. He also argued against the police's assertion that the fresh shoe print proved her husband was the last to drive the car and must have been the one to drop it off at the airport. If it's his footprint, I'm not sure it means anything. My footprint is in my wife's car. That doesn't mean I've ever done her any harm, Robert stated. Still, Bonnie was nowhere to be found. Hoping that her young son had witnessed something, investigators rushed to bring a representative from Child Protective Services in to question the 3-year-old. When asked what happened to his mother, Aaron replied, "Daddy hurt her." Still, Bonnie's family would cast doubt on what their grandson claimed. The credibility of a child is something that you have to judge in perspective, Robert would say. He said a couple things that we know were not true. Mom's car is in the lake. We know her car wasn't there. Within a short amount of time, investigators had followed all leads and could come up with nothing. No one could find Bonnie, and no one had seen her in the time she had disappeared. Without any further evidence against Michael, no charges could be filed. From what Aaron told us that day, my only conclusion was that there had been a domestic fight, that Michael Haim had killed his wife and had removed her, and that their 3.5-year-old son Aaron Haim had witnessed this, said Detective Hinson. For decades, no charges were filed against Michael. Aaron would be taken from the home and later adopted by Jeannie and Ronnie Frazier. He took their last name, and as the years passed, the memory of his early childhood faded. When he got married, he even asked his wife to not ask him questions about his mother's disappearance. That all changed when Aaron and his adoptive mother decided to file a multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit in the amount of $26.3 million against his father, Michael, in April of 2005. They would go on to win that case, with Aaron also winning the deed to his early childhood home, that 3-bedroom ranch-style home off of Dolphin Avenue. For almost 11 years, he used the home as a rental property, but decided in 2014 it was time to make renovations. He rented an excavator and, with the help of his brother-in-law, began demolishing the backyard swimming pool. As they tore up the ground, part of the area around the outdoor shower began to crack and had to be torn up and replaced as well. Unfortunately, as Aaron broke the concrete slab up with a sledgehammer, he accidentally broke a water pipe in the process. While digging in the dirt for the broken pipe, he discovered a round object wrapped in heavy plastic that he at first thought was a coconut, but when he looked under the object, he could see teeth. Aaron had discovered a human skull buried about 6 inches under the concrete. Anyone can imagine, even if it's not a loved one, finding a skull, picking it up, just what that would do to somebody, he told the media. Before anything else could be disturbed, police were called in. After careful examination of both the body and a .22 caliber bullet casing found underneath it, investigators would conclude that the remains were those of Bonnie Haim. Finally, with evidence in hand, investigators were able to arrest now 52-year-old Michael Haim at his home in North Carolina. At trial, it was revealed that the medical examiner ruled the death a homicidal death by unknown means, even though the spent .22 caliber shell was found in the grave. Investigators said Michael owned a .22 caliber Marlin Model 60 at the time of the murder, which police confiscated and took into evidence. Friends who knew Bonnie claimed that in the months leading up to her disappearance, she had been planning to leave Michael, who was allegedly both emotionally and physically abusive to her, going so far as she even started a secret bank account to help fund her escape. To keep her plans secret, she had the bank statements mailed to her at work. But Michael discovered the bank account and forced her to shut it down. Against his wishes, Bonnie continued to save her money and had given a friend $1,250 to keep for her. She had also placed a deposit on an apartment in another town and begun making plans to move in with her young son on January 23, 1993, while her husband was away on business. Unfortunately, Michael discovered her plans, which led to the fight and her disappearance on January 6th. Michael said he was innocent, and at trial he continued with that claim, testifying, "I love my wife, and I would have never hurt my wife." For the first time in close to 26 years, Aaron was able to face his birth father in court, where he testified about what he remembers from the day his mom vanished. He also testified about how he found her skull. Bonnie's sister, Liz Peak, presented a memory book filled with photos and stories of the life her sister had led. We will be able to show the judge how much Bonnie loved Aaron, her family, and her friends, and how much we loved her. The jury didn't believe Michael's pleas of innocence, taking only 90 minutes to deliberate before finding him guilty of second-degree murder. Because the murder occurred back in 1993, Florida's older, more lenient laws applied. Under those guidelines, Michael would face 7 to 22 years, and he could get out sooner for good behavior. They also found 3 aggravating factors in a short sentencing trial, but they didn't find that the murder was heinous, atrocious, and cruel, a critical finding in the state's efforts to seek a sentence above the maximum allowed under those guidelines. Prosecutors have asked the court to sentence the 53-year-old above those guidelines, asking for a full life-term sentence. The judge will have to decide if the aggravating factors that Aaron witnessed the murder, that Michael tampered with evidence, and that the murder caused harm to Bonnie Haim and her family warrant the tougher sentence. The sentencing hearing will begin on May 17th, 2019. State Attorney's Office Homicide Director Alan Mizrahi told the jury during opening statements that Bonnie and Michael Haim had a fairy tale romance that turned dark after Bonnie decided to leave the marriage. Quote, "The fairy tale turned into a nightmare because this husband could do absolutely nothing in this world to stop his wife from taking his son and leaving. So he killed her. While some sins can be buried away, the truth was always out there." Case cracked. You may have seen this case. There's been a lot of press about it recently over the past several weeks, so we wanted to cover it here as well. Just heartbreaking that Aaron had to lose his mother in that way, that he likely witnessed something back then. I mean, the emotional ramifications from that alone, I'm sure it's been a lifetime of dealing with. And then to have this kind of come back, even taking on the wrongful death suit, one has to really consider things about that. Is it worth it? Is it worth this whole process of going through this whole event again and at more detail than your memory could probably even provide from when it actually happened? But Aaron has been brave in facing those things time and time again. And I believe that it's no accident that he actually found the location of where his mother was. It could even be that it was just that he had heard stories when he was really young about where she was. Maybe his father had said something or spoke to someone else about it, and he had some little piece of that information deep in his subconscious. I really don't think it's an accident that he discovered his mother in that way. I'm thankful he did, because now, of course, her friends and family can properly mourn their loss and move forward from that. And of course, now we have justice coming. But then we have that question too. Kind of interesting that they're holding him to the old statutes for Florida. 7 years for murdering a spouse. I know we just talked about the Karen Rostevsky case, and we kind of had that same issue pop up there. Her husband that we know murdered her, only sentenced for 6 or 7 years, if I recall correctly. There's people that are looking to try to get the courts to overturn that, to provide him with a stiffer sentence. I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out in a few weeks with Michael's sentence as well. Before I end today's episode, I have to thank several people who have contributed to the channel through PayPal. Thank you so much. Zoe Marshall, I really appreciate that donation. Thank you, Zoe. Tilly the Divine, hey Tilly, thank you so much for the support. And Carol Lee, thank you. I truly, truly appreciate it. Also want to give you all a quick update. Destiny Rescue has sent me another email telling me about what happened in April. This April, you mobilized more than 25 rescue agents across 5 countries to go undercover, locate underage victims, gather intel, execute raids, and bring 132 lives to freedom and safety. It's because of your monthly support that our agents can go out night after night and rescue more kids. Of course, just in case you don't know, we support Destiny Rescue. Everyone that contributes to me, we have a monthly payment that's been going to Destiny Rescue for, I think, about 1.5 years at this point. If you want to learn more, contribute in your own way, or even buy jewelry that is made by some of the people that have been rescued, you can do all of that at www.destinyrescue.org. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate having you out there. Come back on Wednesday for a brand new episode of Searchlight right here on the Lord and Arts channel.